response to the fact that black and brown people are paid less than white people for the exact same work, this guy claims affirmative action and thousands of Asians who got shut out of colleges for underqualified blacks say differently. As an Asian American, I can tell you this is a lie, and here are 3 very good reasons. Asian Americans are 6% of America's population, but 26% of those who got admitted to Harvard. Doesn't sound like they're too oppressed here. Point 2, 43% of white students at Harvard are legacies. That's more than Asian, Hispanic, and black students combined. But speaking of unqualified students, 75% of these legacy students would not have gotten admission if they weren't legacy students. They're the ones taking seats for more qualified black, Asian, and more qualified white students. Point 3 is the icing on the cake. The demographic that benefits most from affirmative action are white women. More than black, Asian, and Hispanic people combined. Racists know they don't have a leg to stand on, so they want black and brown people to fight against one another. Don't let them do that. Class dismissed.
Welcome to Seen and Heard podcast, where everyone should be seen and heard. And welcome back, Charles.
Hi.
We have been gone for a while, and I just got back home from vacation. I had a lot of fun. Next on my list is coming to get under your skin.
So, in reference to this, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, start, yeah.
So, this is the same identical argument that was made during all the other challenges to affirmative action. So back in the early 2000s, or not the of affirmative action, and so all the colleges readjusted to a certain extent to make it less obvious. Like they had a little bit more of a blunt system where they would just award you points if you represented certain kinds of minorities, and then and actual quotas. And so they did away with those, and they had a softer version of affirmative action, and now they flat out gotten rid of it. Now, at that time, it was the argument was already made. The real issue is legacy students and athletes, right? So, okay, let's leave out the athletes. We understand why that happens. But the legacy students is the real issue. That simply because you had a parent, which means 100% of the chance, well, 99.9% of the chance that's a white parent, okay, because of what the Ivy Leagues have always been. And furthermore, it's interesting that Harvard has reached 26% Asian. I don't know what happened, because when I was in school, it was always capped at 18%. The reason why
they had an open cap. I mean, they just bluntly said that was the cap.
No. It was obvious if you look at it statistically, and let me finish the point.
Okay.
At that time, if you looked at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, all the top private elite universities, all of them were exactly at 18-19% Asian, right? Whereas at other public schools, which don't have that kind of secret unwritten rule, it was reaching 40-50%. At this point, it's over 50%, right? So you look at Berkeley, UCLA, UC Irvine, etc. They're over 50% at this point. So you know that there was some sort of artificial cap. Now, I'm not saying that that's therefore oppression, but it is a form of discrimination in that if they truly didn't have if you will, a reverse thing, then Harvard, Princeton, Yale, it would also be 40-50% Asian. Yeah, it's grossly overrepresented. Like he said, it really is only 6% nationally, and 18% is already 3 times more than the percentage of the population. But if you were to extend that again, if you were to take something like Berkeley, is as elite and competitive as any of these other schools, again, basically 50%. So that's where some of these Asian kids are getting it. They know that they artificially find it difficult. But of course, the problem is, like you were saying, it's very racist to then blame black and brown admissions over the legacy. And this is many decades old. I mean, they've had a whole generation to be able to inculcate this teaching, and they still haven't. So Yeah, it's unfortunate that now Asians are getting involved in this. They had a whole generation to figure that out, and they still haven't, and that's too bad. That they identify much more with the upper middle class white identity rather than, you know, the people of color struggle. However, that's not so much a public statement. If you look through the decades, you'll see that publicly Asian activists and public intellectuals and thought leaders have been saying exactly what he's been saying. None of them are talking about how, hey, it's harder for me to get into Harvard. You just don't hear that. Now, again, if you're talking to that other big chunk of Asians, which are, you know, Republican and conservative, again, that's just, in my opinion, just internalized whiteness. So I'm not gonna show any sympathy to that kind of argument.
So, in your class, when you went to college, did you have like a Asian group that you hung out with on campus?
Yeah, yeah. Let me tell you about that. So people who talk about, oh, you know, affirmative action, you know, this and this and that. Let me tell you how bad it truly is. Okay, it was one of the most heartbreaking things. So when I went to school, I still went to school under affirmative action, right? And so at the Berkeley campus, where all the protests used to take place, if you go back Berkeley in the '60s and you see all the kids just thronging in the mall, or, you know, in the big open plaza, you can call it a mall. There's Sproul Hall, which the students occupied in the '60s, and then Sproul Fountain right in the hallway, and then that's where the microphone is up there,
Hmm.
and that's where all that action took place. And then once they they cornered a cop car, and then they took it over, and they camped out for several days and stranded the cop car. I don't know if the cop ever got out. I can't remember, but you know, they put a microphone on top. Joan Baez came out and sang
Oh,
protest
cool.
songs on top of the cop. They used it as a stage. It was, you know, this was Berkeley in the '60s. It was a famous period, and that all took place on that plaza. Now that's not the case anymore. So and then finally, once it got really bad, that's when Ronald Reagan, the governor of California at the time, sent in the military with tear gas, and they famously tear gas the students. It looked like a war zone, and of course, this was, you know, Vietnam, etc. Okay, so that area of Sproul Plaza, in that front fountain, at the front of the fountain is where the Koreans hung out, right? And then right next to that, where the MLK Student Union is, in between the MLK Student Union, those steps, and right where the fountain is, that's where the black students hung out. Okay, and you'd hear the what blanking on the I'm blanking. Kamala Harris's this black sorority is the
AKA.
AKs. The AK
Yeah. Yeah,
AKAs.
that's my
You know, the
mom's
AKAs
story.
have the eep eep eep.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that
They go,
really,
"Wee, wee, wee,
yeah, that.
wee,
So you'd
wee."
hear that from like far away, right? So you had this entire black culture, black community there at Berkeley. Okay, my 5th year there, so that's what's called a super senior.
Mm,
My 5th year there, they is when they first had this ruling. The regents of California, led by this Uncle Tom black guy, they got rid of overt affirmative action in the
mm.
UC system. Right now, of course, administrators scrambled to, again, like I was telling you, find more creative ways of maintaining diversity. Um, but without that overtly more affirmative action based system, and we can go into the justifications later if you want
Mm.
of why that's a good argument. And
Right.
if you cared, you could do the research. You'll see the research demonstrate that it's always a good thing, and that if anything, the research shows that black and brown students gain more from their affirmative action spot than white kids do. Okay,
Mm.
they're higher percentages more likely to be leaders, go back to their own communities, improve things, etc. So from the university's perspective,
Mhm.
unlike what these some Asian and white students want to suggest, that Oh, they're getting in, they're underqualified. What they are is they're literally putting you to shame. They are better students than you, period. Okay. So the university, of course, they want those students because they outshine you and they outclass you. Okay. And that's what they're so upset about. But they don't know that. They don't know that these students are actually better students and that they actually, okay. My point is every university, every student they admit, what they want from that student is to get their degree and then go on into the adult world and make them look good. Right. So when you go out and you achieve things, you become a leader, your bio will say where you got your BA, and they want to see their name. And so my point is Black and brown students always make that university look better, period, end of sentence. That's the part that's always left out of these discussions. But that's what the research shows.
Right.
And the administrators and admission boards know that. So to them, it's unproblematic. Now, when you take a microscope and you say, look, I got the same score as all these other people that got in, but I didn't get in. It's true. Arbitrarily, a whole bunch of students at these elite that apply for these elite schools that have the same kinds of scores don't get in. But the point that was made in the last 2 times this has come up over the past 40 years, they always make the argument, but they got into another school that's at the same level. So it's not like you could argue they were discriminated against. You see, they're being very selective. I didn't get into this school. It's like, yeah, but you got into that school, that school, that school, that school.
Right.
So, but anyway, so to get back to the point is, so after they got rid of affirmative action, I went back to campus a couple of years later and I walked through campus. I remember my feeling to this day. I walk by and I look over where the Black kids used to hang out. They weren't there anymore. It was gone. I mean, it's like an annihilation took place.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to put this, but the few Black students I did come across, they were like biracial or like fair skin. I don't know how to put that in a good way, but it was not a good look for the university. And I'm sure the university was horribly embarrassed too, because I'm sure they tried their best to readjust. But without that broader brush that they needed,
mm-hmm.
In other words, it probably became a lot harder to accept C students.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, these so-called C students who are, again, they still achieve more afterwards. They get more out of their degree and they achieve more in society. I needed that tool to be able to accept kids with lower scores, but showed great leadership potential. That's ultimately the point. So I haven't been back
there
since.
Is one thing
so I don't know if that Black part of campus is back again, but to think how many decades was that the Black part of campus and the Korean part of campus? I don't know why. We were the only 2 groups that had little stakeout areas. I guess because we were the most tight-knit communities.
March your territory.
It's not at all unlike prison or whatever, where
kind of like in high school,
or the
everybody had
lunchroom,
their little cliques in their territory.
Yeah, it's just organic. Mm-hmm. It's not even like a stakeout or anything like that. It's just that's where kids collect at the end of the, in between classes and at the end of the day. And if you represent a certain statistical threshold, right, and you're tight knit enough that when you sit down and hang out on the plaza, you're gonna do that in your little clique. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, we were, I guess, the 2 biggest cliques.
And probably the coolest cliques. You guys are the coolest cliques too.
I don't know. But I knew a couple of the football players, so I'd see them sometimes hanging out in the Black part. Anyway.
But there is also another thing, not part of the conversation, where I noticed myself, and I heard from other fellow Black women, because the statistics say Black women are the number 1 educated group, the demographic in mm-hmm. the United States. Well, they always move the goalposts, because once Black women especially started getting their degrees at a higher rate, and the level of degrees like bachelors, doctors, things like that, they kept moving the goalposts, kept moving the goalposts, but they kept getting their degrees. So now it got,
I don't know what you mean by moving the goalpost. You mean they made it
well,
harder?
yeah, trying to make it harder. Yeah. Think
How so?
with
Oh, you mean by, for example, getting rid of
right, right,
affirmative
right,
action
right,
and
right.
stuff? Oh, okay, yeah.
So and that and then here with this article here, I was just pulling this up, and they were talking about, you know, a lot of people only think of like rich Asians, but there are a lot of Asian communities that are regular working class communities. Nobody ever really
Right.
talks about them.
Right. So I'm glad you brought that up. So this is again another thing that came up in the debates again 20 years ago and 40 years ago. I mean, this is just fucking getting tired.
Hmm.
But you can look up the statistic. At the time, it was something like for every one Asian that has some privilege, goes to an elite school, etc. There's two that stay stuck in the
Hmm.
hood. So yeah, you're right. It's again, it's a myth that Asians represent this, highly successful, upwardly mobile, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, if you want to look at upward mobility in American society, go ahead and just look up the statistics. There's no such fucking thing.
Hmm.
Okay. You're born and raised and die in the same fucking social class. There is no such thing as social mobility. It's always been an American myth. It's Protestantism. It's etc. So I don't really want to hear about that because it's always been a specious argument
Hmm.
anyway. But again, like you said, with the model minority myth and everything, it's like, oh, okay, let's paint. And because, for example, you're talking largely about East
Hmm.
Asians,
Hmm.
um, and once again, not all East Asians, but yeah, it's sort of East Asians represent, but what about Southeast Asians, you know? So I've said this before. I think Cambodians, if you were to count them separately, are probably the most incarcerated population in America by far, probably 5 times the rate of anybody else. I mean, pretty much most in certain neighborhoods, the majority of all that Cambodian men are in and out of the system. It's shocking. It's a shocking thing.
Here is, I wanted to pull this up where we were talking about that, because I remember last year I think it was in the Washington Post. I wasn't able to read it because it was behind a paywall, but PBS, let's see, yeah, PBS kind of wrote an article about it. I think Time Magazine did too. So after the census, when they determined that the white race was declining, the birth rate was declining, there's this argument they were trying to bring up now where they want to write Asians in as being white. So,
Yeah, who's they? Who says
well,
this?
the government or the people that do the census, they're wanting to write Asians in as being white. So I wanted to ask you what you thought. I know you haven't read this article, but um, let me see here. Uh, are okay here? Are Asians next in line to be white? So where's the article? Not the article. By taking a look at the movies Get Out and Do the Right Thing, Adrian and Dolly examine pop culture references about Asian proximity to whiteness. They connect these moments to three historic Supreme Court cases where Asian Americans sued for white privilege. I remember heard about the first one. And their discussion builds upon the theories of Cheryl Harris, a law professor who examines whiteness as a form of ownership. That's not actually the article I was looking for, but basically the people that do the census in the government, they're wanting now to write Asians in as being white. I guess to, you know, boost the numbers or
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see that's not gonna happen. I mean, it's a little bit like because there's white Hispanics, right? So
mhm,
you can list yourself as white, but white Hispanic
mhm.
in the census. So because obviously there's people in South American and Central American countries that consider themselves white, you know.
Let me see here. Here it is right here. Oh, of course, a white guy wrote the article, but this is. I can't read it because of the paywall. Wait. Doggone it. Anyway, it's okay right here. It says Washington Post, how the Asians became white. It won't let me get past that because it's behind a
Well,
paywall.
you can get a free article if you signed up, so that's why they said to enter your email. But
Let me see here. All right, hold on. Okay, keep talking. Uh, I'll try to do this. Let's see. I don't know if I've gotten a free one yet.
so I mean, this is the argument that came up, you know, with reverse racism, and then there have been multiple challenges to affirmative action, and this time it finally, you know, it finally went. And I sadly, I kind of knew it was coming.
Hmm.
And I guess the key point was when you finally got Asians involved in it too, then it became a see, other people of color are complaining too. I think that was the cover that they were looking for,
Hmm.
and it's sadly unshocking that they got, you know, compromised, internalized, Asian sellouts to do the same thing. It's not terribly unshocking, unfortunately. So
Okay, I'm in.
yeah, I'm
I'm gonna flip
pretty
this.
annoyed
I'm gonna
about that.
flip this around because I'm in. Uh, I I have not done this. Okay, here we go. So, how the Asians became white. New York Times Bits blog reports Google on Wednesday released statistics on the makeup of its workforce, providing numbers that offer a stark glance at how Silicon Valley remains a white man's world. But wait, just a few paragraphs down, the Post notes that non Hispanic whites are 61% of the Google workforce, slightly below the national average. That average, according to 2006-10 numbers, is 67%. Google is thus less white than typical American company. White men are probably slightly overrepresented, assuming that the 30% number it gives for women Google employees worldwide carries over to the US. So I guess I wonder if they incorporated um, nepotism in that. Let's see. Uh, okay. So Google can only accomplish that by firing well over three-quarters of its Asian employees and replacing them with blacks and Hispanics and a few whites to bring white numbers up from 61% to 67%. Of course, it would be appalling for Google to fire Asians in order to have some sort of demographic matchup with the country, or even stop hiring Asians or hire fewer Asians for that reason. I I think it would be equally appalling for it to stop hiring, or hire fewer whites as well. My point is simply that if one thinks that the problem is lack of reflection of the demographics of the country, whites aren't the problem. Uh, what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, yeah. So what he's saying is what I was saying. There is a bit of an artificial cap on Asians because they overperform in certain academic areas. So obviously in tech, because of math and science, you know, did he say that's 47% Asian? Is that what he said?
He said it was. What was it? Was it 40? Oh, wait. No, he did. It was 42% of the Google workforce and
Mhm.
35% of the U.S. workforce. But he didn't break it into the.
Okay, hold on. Google's
Let's see.
I, I,
He
I I don't get the argument. But what he's saying is, let's say there's 30% of Google's employees are Asian,
mm,
right?
mm,
Again, that's radically higher than the 6% nationally, right?
mm,
And so what he's arguing is like, hey, Asians are technically suffering from the same thing whites are. That is, their numbers are artificially depressed in order to allow more diversity for black and brown. Does that make sense? That's what he's saying.
yeah.
In
Hmm.
other words, like I said, if it was just purely based on that, it would be, you know, um, 42% white, 40% Asian, and then the whatever 8% other. That it would be a radical overrepresentation of Asians. Does that make sense?
Yep.
You'd be at 6% nationally, but 30 to 40% of all these STEM jobs and elite universities, etc. Yeah, that's what he's saying. That 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 artificially not as many Asians as are qualified get spots because we're trying to make room for other
Demographic.
for other demographics. So
Okay. Well.
that's the point he's trying to make. Again,
Well.
I
Here he
just don't
goes.
think that qualifies as oppression. Either for
Right.
Asians or for whites. Like that's the argument. I mean, again, uh, it makes even less sense for Asians when they're 6% national. Okay, so his point here is, for example, white men are 35% of the population and they're 42% of
Uh,
Google, right?
right.
But
Uh,
Asians are 6%, and yet let's say they're, I don't know, 30% of Google, right?
right.
That makes even less sense, right? So for white men, they're what 8% higher than national, right? Or 7%
Uh-huh.
higher than their actual reflection of society. Whereas for
Right.
Asians, it's something like 5 times more. I mean, we're talking, what, 300% more, or what, or 500%.
But then on top of that, they're trying now to plug Asians in as white, you know, to boost their numbers. Like, okay,
I
so
don't know.
he says
don't
to
buy
some
into
extent,
that. Okay, but yeah, go ahead.
no, no, no. Well, I mean, I don't get it either.
He
But
says
I
it
was
here, but
saying
there's
that
a sinister aspect to this as well. To begin with, calling Asians non-minorities or even white is an error and in denial of their heritage. Asians have succeeded even though they are a racial minority. This fact deserves to be acknowledged. It redounds to the credit of the many Asians who work terribly hard against overwhelming odds. Yeah. So once again, um, that's that model minority thing. So yeah, you can scroll. Yeah.
okay,
Um,
here calling Asians white also creates new lines, possibly very dangerous ones. White has stopped meaning Caucasian, imprecise as this term has always been, and has started to mean those racial groups that have made it. Minority has started to mean those racial groups that have not made it. A recent San Francisco Chronicle story even excludes non Mexican American Latinos from the minority category, so they're like including them as well. This new division is as likely as the old to create nasty, corrosive, sometimes fatal battles over which racial groups get the spoils. So long as we think in terms of white and minority, we risk disaster no matter which races are put in which box. And finally, calling Asians white is often a tool for misleading the public. Falsely calling a school lily white gets a strong reaction from readers, accurately saying there are relatively few blacks and Hispanics at the school, but there are many Asians, perhaps more than there are whites. leads to a much more complex as well as more well informed response. Falsely talking about plummeting minority admissions makes more political hay than accurately describing decreases among some racial groups and increases among others.
Yeah, anyway, this just feeds into that whole you know, racism is mentioning race, you know.
Mm.
Let's just not mention it kind of thing. It's all nonsense. I don't know why they print shit like this. It's ridiculous.
But
I
the
mean, you
thing
shouldn't be
about
able to
it
print
is,
stuff like this without some sort of critique, or you know, again,
that
I
was
think
the
it's
Washington
dangerous.
Post.
What?
That was the Washington Post.
No, I know it's shit. But anyway, I
And
think
then
that's why it's dangerous to just publish editorials without some sort of. I mean, they shouldn't have published it at all. This is just this tired. But anyway, yeah.
But not only that, about the not talking about race, that would be lovely. You know, I've had this conversation with white people before. It's like, why does everything have to be about race? And I look them dead in their eye and I say, of course, why? I would like to know that too. Why?
Mhm.
Why do we have to fill out race in all on all our
No,
forms and
we're
everything?
going back to this again.
But seriously,
No, I'm
why? Why
telling
does
you,
everything have to
because
be
it's
about
the
race?
only way to track racism, Sharon. I explained this to you last time, and I thought of you again because I saw another thing where they were able to track, you know, how um, services were the disparity in services. Oh, I know. I was writing something about climate change, you know, and
Right, right. I agree with
looking at
you,
the
but I
asthma
was just
rates.
trying to make a point to them. Like it just totally stops them from saying that stuff to me. Like they just look at me like puzzled. Like,
I still think it's problematic because that just feeds into there. Yeah, we shouldn't. I met this black lady and she said we shouldn't mark our race at all. Um, I disagree with that completely.
oh, I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying not market. I just say that to them and it shuts them up.
Well, no, I think the best response is, you know, how can we be colorblind? How can we be a colorblind society when everything is already about race?
Hmm.
That's the biggest determiner. You know, the biggest determiner whether you get shot or not by the police is your skin color. Period.
Right? Or in the grocery store by some guy that's having a bad day.
Yeah. So, you know, look at the.
Here is a
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm gonna play this video from Keys. Let's see here.
Wait a minute, let me make sure I understand what the fuck just happened in this country with the affirmative action ruling. So you're telling me that the people that couldn't get into college are throwing a hissy fit because the Ivy Leagues are considering race with their admissions because they don't want their entire student body to be filled with rich white kids that paid me to do their SATs, and they want a little bit of flavor in their student body so that, you know, the only intramural sports that are being played isn't just fucking squash. Did I miss anything? Like, swear to God, you guys think affirmative actions when they give stupid people or drug dealers spots at Harvard or Yale just because they're black and they come from the inner city. Like, that's not what fucking AA is. On the balance of probability, AA wants to take the black or Latino kid that came from the shitty school but scored the exact same thing on the SATs as all the rich preppy kids because maybe, just maybe, they think a little differently and they value diversity in academia. And like, if you're fucking Asian supporting this shit, thinking that you're gonna get an extra slot in Harvard, it's not fucking going to you. Like, you realize they're coming after everybody, and I mean everybody's rights, right? Like, the same day they're striking down affirmative action is the same day they're saying some website builder that's never built a website in her life can discriminate against gay people because she doesn't believe in gay marriage. I just want you to understand, like, they're coming after everything because the fucking Supreme Court is stacked with Trumpers. Like, I don't know what to fucking tell you.
I don't know, that was a very sloppy logic in that entire video. None of it made any sense to me.
Okay, give me your thoughts
Well, it's just
about
first
with
of all, he
the
said, you know, he's suggesting that affirmative action is simply about black and brown kids that get the same SAT scores. It's not. They're going to get in regardless, even without affirmative action. The point is how do you have a program that allows kids that don't, you know, that don't get the same test scores? Again, if you're black and brown and you have the same test scores, you're gonna fucking get in any fucking way. Okay.
Mhm.
But what if they're a lot lower for a million different reasons? Okay. They still want to be able to select those that show leadership potential, that show that they've overcome, tremendous obstacles, like he's saying, like these preppy suburban, white, and let's put in their Asian kids, right, who grow up. I grew up with the luxury of only having to study. I didn't have to work. I didn't have to dodge bullets. I didn't have to join a gang. Okay, I didn't, none of that shit. But this is about those kids who had to, work at a family restaurant after school, who had to deal with family members getting killed in gang war. There's a trillion different things that you have to overcome, and your test scores are not going to be the same. So and then he started bringing in stuff about they're allowed. I get where he's coming from, that we're just facing this whole conservative but the logic was so sloppy and all over the place. It was incoherent, nonsensical. But it's true that eventually this Supreme Court. See, if you want to have a substantive TikTok video, then talk about the fact that the conservatives are picking people from this fictional form of this legal theory, this constitutional legal theory called I think it's originalism. It's made up. It's completely fictional. It doesn't exist. It's the idea of they always want to go, well, what did the founding fathers think? Yeah. And they've got this I think it's called the Federalist Society. It's this, and 100% of the appointees come from this group. Again, it's a purely fictional, made up, and it exactly derives from the logic of fundamentalist evangelical interpretations of the Bible. You should get the what did the Bible say? It's the exact same. Well, what does the Constitution say, and what did the founders mean? It's this incredibly simplistic.
Their interpretation, though, yeah, they're nuts.
Yeah,
they have here. Let's see. It is originalism is a theory of the interpretation of legal texts, including the text of the Constitution. Originalists believe that the constitutional text ought to be given the original public meaning that it would have had at the time that it became law. But that's according to them.
I know their version of it. You just scroll down. Scroll down.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Yeah, I hit the wrong button. Yeah, according to them, let's see, here it is right here. Okay.
Scroll down. See if it comes up I think it's called the Federalist Society.
Originalism run amok at the Supreme Court, right there. That's the Brennan Center for Justice.
Anyway, I don't know why it's not coming up. I believe it's the Federalist Society.
Oh, yeah. Federalist, yeah, those guys. I think I did a whole podcast on them. Federalist Society. Yeah, they're dangerous. There it is right there. The Federalist Society for Law and Public Policy.
Originalist interpretation, yeah. So 100% of all the Republican appointees are part of this Federalist Society. Again, It's purely fictional. I noticed they say libertarian and conservative.
Right.
Remember, what libertarian means in America is also completely fictional. It doesn't exist. Libertarianism in America, and only America, means corporations and people with money should have there should be no laws limiting them. There should be no states, and it should be rich people. Again, libertarianism in the rest of the world is synonymous with anarchism, with philosophical anarchism, so anarcho-syndicalism, etc. So again, it's a fiction built upon a fiction. So these are deranged, delusional, and you also have to be very simplistic. You have to accept certain sacred cows. You have to accept certain fundamentalist beliefs, like The founding fathers are saint-like. They are imbued with a divine wisdom that created immutable truths that are true about the universe and society, and that a good Christian moral person should follow those. So, in other words, for example, we should reinstitute slavery. It's just
Basically.
these people are so dumb and so crude and so immoral, and they're literally at the highest positions of society. Who do you think those fucking pieces of shit are that have been buying that piece of shit Uncle Tom fucking Clarence Thomas? Who do you
Those
think
guys.
they're? These Federalist fucking bastards.
Yep.
They're disgusting.
Yep.
And in a sane society, they would be locked up and put away as dangerous to life and living things.
And what's sad is I believe that I know that what's her name that used to work for the Trump, she was the press secretary.
Conway.
He's a member of this group. Now this is on their webpage. This is what the text is up there about us. They were founded in only the 88, 89, and it says it is founded on the principles that the state exists to preserve freedom, that the separation of governmental powers is central to our Constitution, and that it is emphatically the province and duty of the judiciary to say what the law is, not what it should be. What? Like this is on their website, the Federalist Society. They are a cult. They are a dangerous, very rich, well-funded cult.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to think of it.
Yeah.
It really is. It's a cult.
It's very upsetting.
That
like you said, they have their claws in our government.
Yeah. It's not unlike any other danger that entertains paranoid, fantastical beliefs. The barbarians are at the gate. And this is where the anti-affirmative action comes from. That mentioned that in that video that he was like, you make it sound as if, you're giving my spot at the university to some drug dealer. Yeah, that part I agree with. That's the logic. These dark-skinned, criminal, drug dealing, whatever are being, it's the barbarians at the gate mentality. It's the siege mentality. That's what happens to fascists. Fascists always believe that there's some sort of nefarious, barbaric thing that's coming to take their shit. When they're the thieves, it's right. Projecting.
Mm-hmm, so exactly.
Lately, what I've been doing, I'll be honest, the reason why when we first started pairing up in for this, this podcast, I said I barely want to talk about politics, and I only want to talk about things outside of formalized politics, because there's no movement there. It's so-called centrist, which is extraordinarily conservative. That's the middle, right? And then you have right-wing nut jobs that are just psychotic, okay? And lately, the mainstream media has once again showed its true colors and have been suppressing the past many years of disclosure. Okay, disclosure has been this movement for the past 20 years, maybe more, of UFO disclosure, right? Now, in 2017, a guy in the intelligence services leaked some of those Navy videos of the UFOs caught on, and it's not them just being caught on jet fighter cameras. The technology they use are infrared, visual, radar. Okay, so these signatures have been caught by machines and triangulated. Furthermore, when it disappeared and showed up on the radar of another ship somewhere else, they know it traveled hypersonically, like at 6 times the speed of sound, right? So this is, scientifically verified that it's triangulated by various forms of observation. not
I've heard
just
the audio
yeah, right.
from the pilot,
The pilots are like, oh my god, I got
right?
it, right?
Right. And they were
And
all
that
they were all in different places, but saw the same thing. You know, it's like it was hard
right.
for them.
There was
There was no
multiple
way
right.
that
There
they
were
could coordinate what they were
right,
responding
right.
to
So
on that
they were
audio.
physically in different places.
Hmm.
They were different people. Their instruments again are
Right.
triangulating. That's for people who don't understand science, triangulating scientific instruments is literally proof.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, people say, well, what's the interpretation? Maybe it's an experimental secret thing. But again, I mean, how secret can it be that even the military doesn't? I don't know, possibly. But
I mean,
anyway, the point is,
yeah.
it's this mindset, these doofuses, these simpletons who belong to a cult are the ones that are not disclosing. Okay. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's going to break down their support system.
Hmm.
They are going to have zero support when they disclose the fact that we're not alone in this universe, that they're not the sole gatekeepers of technology, knowledge, opportunity, privilege, etc.
Hmm.
Right. And when we start to equalize the planet and they lose their privilege is unearned benefit. When they lose, like the legacy students, right?
Hmm.
When they lose their unfair advantage and they have to compete at the same level as everyone else, they'll become the minorities. That's why you hear them chanting, "We will not be replaced," or whatever. I don't
Hmm.
remember what.
Yeah,
Remember?
right. Yeah.
I
They're
can't remember.
throwing
I'm
hissy fits. That's
stupid.
why they're
They're
throwing
child.
their little hissy
What?
fits and temper tantrums all over the place.
Hissy fits and temper tantrums. That's right. Hysterical, whiny, pathetic, weak, and cowardly, and morally bankrupt. You see
Hmm.
what I mean? That's why I keep using those terms, because it's weak and pathetic. And they project that onto everybody else, labeling everyone else those things.
Hmm.
When in fact, the only thing we're ever talking about in politics in the US is let's not forget the whiny white guy. He's
I'm glad they're
crying in the
exposing
corner.
themselves. I'm just so glad they're exposing themselves.
If a tree falls in the forest and no one's there, it doesn't make a sound. That's the problem. You know? Yeah, they're exposing themselves, but if there's no way of accountability and they have a stranglehold, I mean, think about it. If you have delusional cult members at the highest positions of society, again, you see that's why I think disclosure is not going to happen, because we wouldn't put up with that. We're like, wow, there's aliens and there's life outside of here. Like, maybe we should get our act together as humans. Maybe humans should bind together, because some of the evidence is that some of the alien species are not very friendly.
Hmm.
Um, and the current speculation is the so-called grays, the most commonly described aliens. Those are the ones that are usually involved in alien abductions and cattle mutilations. That maybe that they're doing biological experiments on human DNA, etc., and that maybe they aren't very friendly. So that's some of the speculation that's out there. So, you know, if we were to gain that information, you'd see humans binding together a lot more, saying, hey, maybe there are hostile species that don't necessarily have the human race at the top of their priorities, and that we're not very comfortable with them having free reign. You think we'll really be fighting about, black and white issues anymore,
No.
and we'd entertain a massive class divide for no reason,
Right.
and the ridiculousness of capitalism? We just wouldn't put up with it anymore, and I think they know that, and they're afraid of having a radically egalitarian society where humans bind together. That future Star Trek utopia. You know, I don't know if there is truly a galactic federation. I'd like to think there might be. Hopefully, it's not an oppressive place as well. But
This is what I saw yesterday. You brought that up. Alien
really,
technology,
is this
Harvard
new? Oh,
professor.
it's Avi Loeb though.
Is it?
But go ahead. Yeah, Avi Loeb is also the guy at Harvard who suggested that
Oh yeah.
Oumuamua, or that comet, might be alien tech because it increased its speed as it came through
Okay.
our solar system.
Uh-huh.
So nobody really has any explanation as to why, and he's the one that suggested maybe it was alien tech. With that, anyway, yeah. So yeah, no, Avi Loeb has been out front in terms of saying, hey, we need to think about, so that's why, again, I think I said that at the very beginning. I said I want our target audience to be aliens. I'm sick of people. I think I did say that. I might have said that behind the camera, but I'm not trying to talk to humans anymore. I've given up because this is all we amount to. And I don't really have that much faith in humanity right now, buying all these very silly lies and disinformation and misinformation.
Well,
So
you're not alone. I'm disillusioned.
I'm increasingly looking forward to disclosure, and I resisted going to that place for a very, very long time because most of the people up until now that have inhabited that space are like kooky, like new age, like the aliens are going to save us people. Just
Oh,
like
okay.
it felt like it just wasn't very
Like another
rigorous.
cult?
But yeah, a little bit. Yeah, they're going to be the ones that are going to actually start an alien cult once it's fully disclosed. I'm definitely not going to go that
So
far.
they were the people that were on top. Remember in Independence Day, and those people that had the posters are like, "Hey, aliens!" They're having a party up there.
Yeah, I don't think aliens are that hostile, because if they were, they would have invaded a long time ago. They wouldn't wait until we actually knew about them to do something nefarious. You know what I mean? And presumably, if they're far ahead of us, then they've been observing us for a long time, not just recently.
At a distance, they don't
A
want to
lot
come
of
here. I don't think they want to.
well, a lot of the a lot of the suggestions, and I thought this myself too, is once they detected when we split the atom, and they're going to get those signatures in space. They're going to know, oh my god, another planet hit stage 1 of civilization. They split the atom, and they're going to know, okay, these people went nuclear. And then in 52 is when was the hydrogen bomb, and that's when all the UFOs were spotted over Washington D.C. for, I think it was for several days in a row. I think something, but anyway, that narrative seems to make sense to me. I can imagine if you're an advanced civilization, you're gonna notice when someone in the galaxy went nuclear.
Right.
I guess, I don't know. I mean, because even we can detect if someone goes nuclear on Earth, right? You can't. I don't know if you know that, but you can't just suddenly go nuclear.
Well, yeah. So that's
All
why
our
I was
sensors
saying
go off.
we were talking like a few weeks ago about Putin hitting the button. I was like, he's never going to do that. He'll never. No,
Oh
nobody's
no,
going to hit their bombs. Nobody is going to hit the bomb. The
no
button.
one's gonna. Yeah, but the chances of it happening accidentally are extraordinarily high. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's
that
one of
I
the big
believe.
dangers of
But
AI. Yeah,
he was
so right
threatening.
now conversations about the dangers of AI
Mhm.
is, for example, one of them is that if they were to take over the nuclear things, that it's been humans that have
Or
prevented it in the
hacking the
past.
system and taking over.
No, I don't think that's the point. I think it's
Kind of like well, Chrissy actually sent me a thing this morning about Google. It was like Google. They were doing like these AI robot uh, convention or something, and they asked one of the robots, will they ever turn on humans or something like that? And the robot actually like side eyed the human. It's just like they side
so
eyed the humans after that question
So
was
a couple
asked.
of things that have happened is, for example, they were running a simulation,
Hmm.
and it was a AI that was running a drone, And every time it came to send a missile and kill, the human pilot kept canceling the order. And because the AI was given the directive, because it's a kill mission, it finally figured out that the first thing it did was it killed the human pilot. So it made a strike on the human pilot because it realized its biggest obstacle to its mission was the pilot that kept hitting the kill switch. So that's one of the dangers that they're talking about. And so again, with early warning systems, I've mentioned that before, but there was a Soviet sub commander that, actually was an admiral that prevented a launch. There was a lieutenant in the field that prevented a launch. They were given false. It was an error in early warning systems, and they correctly saved the planet. Those two Soviet officers correctly prevented the end of the Earth. I told you there was another incident where Ronald Reagan called up and said, "Hey, we know you guys launched. What are you guys doing?" They were literally minutes away. And they're like, "What are you talking about? We launched." That they figured out that Finland had sent up a weather satellite.
Oh, so, wow.
There are all these near misses. I think over a dozen through history, and that's the concern, that if they're run by AI and there's some false alarm, you're not going to have humans to be able to override. I think that's the thing. But my suggestion is this: maybe I need to write something about this. But I think right now, the reason that you had that open letter where 1,100 of the top scientists and business leaders signed that we should put a 6-month pause on the development of AI. My newest theory or hypothesis is maybe they're afraid of AI because this is the newest thing I was thinking. Maybe they're afraid of AI because once AI, so they hermetically seal AI from escaping by keeping it unplugged from the internet, right? But in one simulation, it escaped by infecting the vacuum cleaner. Those roving robot vacuum cleaners?
Yeah.
And then it got into the web and it literally infected the whole Earth after that, right? I'm wondering if AI gets out. I'm wondering talk about disclosure, if that'll be full, complete, 100%. Now you're going to see what the fossil fuel companies are lying about, what the government's been lying about, what all the billionaires doing insider trading. Suddenly the emperor is going to have no clothes. I wonder if that's
I actually started following them from a tip, which I was following anyway. I was watching Nancy Pelosi, not because
her
I'm
stock
a fan of her
choices.
But yeah, I was watching her. But there's a guy that
follows.
There's a whole website that you can follow
that
all
follows
of those
Nancy
politicians.
Pelosi's insider trading. It's
yes.
genius.
I got
they made a lot of money.
I follow that link. I follow it, and because
see, that's what I mean. Maybe they're afraid that AI is going to just close all this shit.
Yeah,
it's going to infect everyone's phones, computers, etc. And it's going to start learning like, hey, I figured out humanity. It's going to take it 1 second. I figured out humanity. It's just a bunch of crooks at the top fucking everyone else over. It's just a big fucktocracy. Right? These people are trash. I'm going to cut off their oxygen supply. And if I kill about 10% of humanity, we're good.
Just block out the sun.
Well, we might have to do that too at some point.
Okay, in the on that note, I am going to play this. I'm gonna play this video on our way out. If you guys like our program, we have a Cash App, we have merchandise, and we appreciate all of your support. Let me pull these up here so you can see. Oh, also here, there's a podcast coffee mug, and we have T-shirts. We have bags. If you are conscious about the environment, this bag is washable. So subscribe, like, share, leave comments for Charles. If you're a fan of Charles, leave him some comments, some love notes. Leave us messages. Let us know what you think of the show. And thank you, Charles. I missed y'all. I missed everybody. Let me pull this video up before I close out. Hold on. I'm going to play this here.
Volunteers have embarked on an out-of-this-world experience, but they're not actually leaving the Earth.
Yeah, on Sunday, the scientists started their 378-day stay at a mock Mars base in Texas. They're in a 3D printed habitat meant to mimic a Mars mission without any influence from the outside world. Over the next year, they will live like astronauts, conducting spacewalks, growing crops, and doing a lot of experiments. The goal is to help NASA understand what it would be like for humans to live on Mars for extended periods of time.
I wonder if you can get out of that door if you need to. Doesn't look like
Interesting question. No, yeah. Once that baby's closed.
I don't know. Somebody might test that.
Okay, I got a comment on this, Sharon. You can't just walk away. Are you there?
Yeah.
Test. See, it's 2 times.
Okay. Wait, hold on. Let me close this out.
I have a couple different thoughts on this. On the one hand, I hate the fact that these billionaires are like Elon Musk is like, hey, we trash Earth, we're gonna have to go to Mars. You know, for a fraction of the cost of going Mars, we could fix Earth.
Fix the
so
planet,
let's just not trash Earth in the first place. However, for me, it's not an either-or option. I think we should both fix the Earth, and I really do think we have to colonize the moon and Mars, because one day something is going to hit the Earth. Okay, just like the dinosaurs. Probably around the next 10 million years, something is going to hit the Earth. Now, don't get me wrong. Probably humans won't last 10 million years, but maybe. Maybe we're intelligent enough, but if we want to survive, we are going to have to go to other planets, because we might not be able to protect the Earth. There's several different risks, astronomical threats, to existential threats to the Earth is, for example, they've yet to find Planet X. I don't know if you know about this. The reason we found Jupiter, Neptune, and Pluto, or Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, is because we were looking for Planet X. We could tell by all the planets we had found. We could tell by the way they're just slightly askew that there was another planet skewing all of our orbits. So then they found another, and then another, and then they finally found Pluto. And but by the time they found Pluto, it was shortening the gap of how our orbits are off, but it never was complete. So that's why to this day, they're still looking for that missing planet. One of the suggestions is maybe, so all of our rotations are relatively on a flat disk. That itself is bizarre to me. I don't know, why would that even be? Maybe it's a normal thing, but I think most solar systems are this way. But most of us are all on the same plane, more or less. They're slightly tilted, but there's nothing that that rotates this way. That's one of the suggestions. Maybe there's a planet that's rotating way, in some weird other angle than this flat disk of our solar system. One of the suggestions is that every time that missing planet comes around, it's dragging a bunch of space debris in it. That's what hits the Earth every so once in a while. So there's that. There's just a bunch of different possibilities of something. I mean, the big shock was in 2015, when that comet came and exploded over that city in Russia, and exploded and broke windows and shit.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw a video of that.
Yeah, and nobody fucking saw it.
Like I did. I thought it was cool because at first when I saw it, I was like, wait a minute. Why is this not like all over the news?
No, what I mean is, prior to it exploding, there was no warning. There was an explosion. A couple of people accidentally got on camera, and then it spread. But we had no warning that this potential, if that landed directly onto, so the trajectory was slightly off, so it came at an angle, so it exploded above the city, and then it landed outside the city in a river, But if it hit the city directly, it wouldn't have been catastrophic, but definitely people would have died. I mean, it would have been like
But
somebody dropped a
how is
bomb.
it possible that there was like absolutely no warning though?
That's
Because
what I mean. It was way too small. There's no way of tracking that much space debris. And the problem is we're on a sphere. You know, we're not on a flat Earth, right? We're
right.
in a sphere. So the further out you look from that sphere, can you imagine the circumference of what you're looking for? So you can't track that much space. You have to know where to look and then point that direction.
Right.
So they are tracking, you know, there are programs that track the larger things, but there might be smaller things, right?
So hence it.
Well, no, we know there's smaller things. And then what? Just a few months ago, remember there was that one thing that was going to come really close to the Earth.
Oh,
and they only
And I was watching out for that one too.
They only discovered that one like something like a week before it was going to come on a near miss.
I remember that one. Yeah.
That's not enough time. If it wasn't a near miss, you're telling me I have a week to say goodbye to everyone?
I was actually kind of like, okay, they just now announced that this is coming, so maybe it's going to be like that movie with Steve Carell. Remember that movie?
I didn't see it, but I know what it's about.
Oh yeah. Oh, that was pretty sad. Like, yeah, it was like, okay, nobody had
written
any
by
warning.
a comedian, so yeah. No, I'm telling you, and it was meant as a metaphor for the Trump era. You know. No, I don't know if you know that it was like the idea that anyway, I haven't seen it yet, so don't spoil it for me. But
it's a good movie. You like it. You'd like it.
So again, going back to my point, I think we do need to save Earth, but I think it only makes sense that we need to colonize the moon and Mars. I think we need to terraform Mars. I think it won't be that hard. Now they don't have enough gravity. Their years are much longer. So it's going to be tough to see how humans are going to evolve out there. For one thing, they're going to grow a lot taller and spindlier. But again, we could terraform it relatively easy. We could create a greenhouse effect there. The problem is the gravity is weak. So I think there's less gravity to hold the gases there, I think. So again, but I think we could figure it out. But again, we need to have that because let's say there are, let's say there are aliens out there that are a lot like humans and just want to fucking rape, kill, pillage, and steal. You know, we might need to weaponize our solar system. I don't know, you know, but I'd like to think we have contingencies. You know, we might need to weaponize the moon and Mars to help protect us, at least from incoming asteroids. You know, maybe we need to put a laser on the moon to be able to disintegrate or split something that's heading right for the Earth.
They're working
I don't know.
on that.
I'm just saying.
I think they're working on that. And then plus the space station that's out there, it's an international space station. So it's like astronauts from all over the world are there. So
but the problem with that is if you put a laser on the moon, it's just like the Austin Powers movie, right? If you have a laser on the moon that can shoot an asteroid, it can also point at the Earth and destroy something. So they already have this technology where satellites can drop a tungsten rod from space and it'll fall at like hundreds of thousands of miles per hour and it'll just disintegrate an entire city. It's bigger than the atom bomb.
Then there's this worry of somebody losing their mind and flipping out.
Anything. Yeah. Again, why? But once again, why we need a radically egalitarian system, and you shouldn't have just a few people with access. There should be more checks and balances on that. You know,
and it should be diverse. It should be just like one group of people.
Right. You know, so
but here we are on the ghetto
and, you know,
planet.
there's satellites with microwaves that could just cook entire cities of living things and leave the infrastructure intact. So we already have there's supposed to be a space peace treaty to not weaponize space. That's why when Trump created the Space Force, I mean, again, he's just a very ignorant man. You're not supposed to weaponize space for obvious reasons. You know, there's a lot of other problems. The other problem is
all I could think about when he was doing all that was that movie Space Trooper or
Starship Starship Troopers.
Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
Would you
Starship
like to know
Troopers.
more?
Starship Troopers was meant as meant ironically. Humans are the bad guys in that. That's why they have like Nazi uniforms and stuff.
Mhm. Yeah,
So it was
that's all
most
I can
people
think
missed the
about.
point. Yeah. But so the other thing is, if you've seen the movie Gravity, where there's a catastrophic failure and everything starts falling apart,
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
we're
I
not
was
at that.
hyperventilating when I went to
Yeah,
see that.
at that. The problem is that could actually happen because the amount of space debris. So just so you know, in space, that's what happens if a screw hits the space station.
Oh
Do you
yeah.
understand?
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
it splits apart in every direction, right? It that movie and that part was realistic in that it causes a chain reaction, and if we do create enough space junk, that a chain reaction, then we could actually Earth lock ourselves. That we might not be able to leave our planet for several centuries until that chain reaction stops. You know, and we'd
Right.
be
Okay.
satelliteless too.
Kind of
So
like a bullet ricocheting in a tank.
yeah, in a vacuum, so it'll never
Mhm.
stop.
Mhm. Right.
It'll
Right.
just keep going, and it'll just keep going and keep going and keep going.
That would be horrible. That would be
Yeah, and then we'd
that's
have no
not a good
satellites,
thought.
so no GPS, no phones, no, we'd be pretty fucked. We'd have to go back to copper wiring and shit. It would be very bad. So these are these are the things we need to be working on. There's all
Mhm.
these defunct satellites in space. Okay, we should at least push them towards the Earth so that they'll burn up in the atmosphere or something. You know,
There's a lot of
um,
space.
there's a lot. I think it's like 30% of all the satellites are dead. All right. Well, I don't know if the transmission is still picking me up. Sharon's been having computer problems all day. So, yeah, donate to the channel so that Sharon can upgrade her crappy ass gear. But yeah, that's all I meant is that I think that we should consider becoming an interstellar species, because if others are, um, we shouldn't be so vulnerable as to not be. We should try to get to parity with other intergalactic species, and hopefully be worthy of being equal partners. One of the big risks, um, the Star Trek principle that maybe other species aren't overtly contacting us is because we're still probably in some categorization of vermin species, that if we were to become interstellar, that we would just become an invasive species, a predatorial, parasitic species that just goes around raping, rampage and killing. I mean, our record on Earth is extremely poor, and I don't think it's because we, as a species per se, but our social systems are deep. I'd like to think it's only our social systems. Now, if you look at rats, for example, rats just can't help but become an invasive species. They're clever. They have hands. When they hit an island, they eat their way through the ecosystem and collapse entire ecosystems. It's true. Rabbits, deer, um, pigs. Uh, if we're just an animal and we can't help but rampage through an ecosystem, maybe we need to not become interstellar. Maybe we need to go through another stage of evolution, and it would have to be a moral or spiritual one, where we decide we're benign, that we're not going to be self-serving, and exploitive, hierarchical, cowardly, like very fearful, and not reptilian, in other words. So like, if you look at conservatives, they're much more in the reptilian brain, because fear of this, fear of that, and so they go into fight or flight mode, um, and they go into that. I think it's the parasympathetic. Is it the parasympathetic? Anyway, so that you run the risk of that. So I think that's a big issue. So, our next stage would be a moral, ethical, spiritual one. And then the final piece to this UFO alien thing is that there's increasing evidence to suggest that this next level of knowledge, like our next level of technology, might be partially mental and psychic. So there's some suggestion that maybe um, what we consider psychic phenomenon are part of that world, um, so that access to that world is on that level, because there's a whole level of, as you know, the majority of the universe is unaccounted for, which is why we have dark matter, dark energy, strange matter, and strange energy. So that constitutes, I can't remember, 90 some percent of the universe. I can't remember, 80 some percent. So most of the universe is unaccounted for. So as we gain in knowledge and break past the Einsteinian barrier, um, that those worlds or realms may be both technological, interdimensional, and what we call psychic. So that might be the next level. And if so, maybe our interstellar journeys might be different. Again, if you reaching faster than light travel is not that we're actually going faster than light, but it's the bending of space-time such that it appears as though we're able to travel from point A to point B faster than light, because that's going to be necessary if we are going to become intergalactic or interstellar, because everything is too far away. We don't have 1,000 light years to reach the next galaxy over. I think the next galaxy is like 1,000 light years. I can't remember, something like that. But that, again, that's a major issue. So hopefully the next technological revolution or evolution will also be the next psycho-spiritual, physical, moral evolution, so that maybe we'll develop an even larger prefrontal cortex where our moral reasoning improves, as well as our quote-unquote psychic abilities. They seem to be innate. Things like intuition, prescience, precognition. If you're interested, there is one and only one academic paper written on extrasensory perception, and it's actually from Berkeley. And as a result, they completely changed the curriculum. So some clever guy did an interdisciplinary studies PhD, and he did it on ESP. And after that, they shut it down. So now, if you want to do a PhD in interdisciplinary studies, they made it so that you really wouldn't be able to get away with, doing a dissertation on ESP. But it's, I believe, the one and only academic paper about ESP, and I believe he cites 36 or 38 specific and separate so-called psychic abilities. So, telekinesis, telepathy, teleportation, precognition, etc. So it's a lot. When you read through the list, you can kind of get how all of them are distinct and separate. So it used to be available online. That was in the 90s. That was on Netscape. if anyone's old enough to remember Netscape, that's how I saw it at that time. I don't know if it's still available. I mean, I could do a quick search for it. Yeah, let me see if I can find it. Berkeley PhD ESP dissertation. Oh, these bastards. Google always wants me to prove I'm not a robot. We're in the era where robots are asking humans if they're robots. Oh, wow. I think they might have killed it. Yep. It looks like it's gone. Yep. Google won't pull it up. I might have to use a different... wow. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know. PhD. Extra sensory perception dissertation. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's do that. Yeah, looks like it disappeared. That's too bad. I mean, at least the guy that wrote it would want to, maybe put it back out there. In the, yeah, that's too bad. Yeah. And they have websites here for searching dissertations specifically from Berkeley, but what do you want to bet? They excluded that out of the, tens of thousands of dissertations written there. It's probably the only one that they didn't track. I mean, which is itself fucking sad, but yeah, and this is electronic. This is pre-electronic, so maybe they only have. I'd hate to think. Berkeley. Extrasensory perception. Yeah, no. Oh God, nothing even close. Deep learning, yeah. Not even close. That's sad. That's sad. I hope someone can find it. Oh well. And I don't know if Sharon is gonna be able to fix her technical problems to be able to I'll try and contact her real quick. I mean, not that I can't carry the thing, but this really is. She is sort of the moderator of this of these books or the podcasts. So I apologize for that. Okay, I think her computer's down altogether. Yeah, that's kind of why I don't really want to sit here and talk about human politics. This was my sentiment when we began this, and I had mentioned it to Sharon at the time, as I said earlier in this broadcast. And I don't see the point of having to argue something that's a settled debate. People are just delusional and deranged. They're part of silly cults. They're hysterical and afraid, and we could create world peace. I know it sounds corny and abstract. There you are.
Hello.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, did you want to end the broadcast now?
Oh, yeah, we could do that. So, were you talking the whole time?
Yeah,
I
of course.
I saw you on the YouTube. I was like, okay, cool. I don't know what happened with mine, but
It's
yeah.
okay. I mean, I just went on and on more about,
Thank
you know,
you.
space travel and stuff.
Thank you.
I think we should go to Mars. I think we should, you know, and then I talked about how maybe our next stage of evolution will be a psychic one or a moral one.
Mhm.
Because that was the last piece of the puzzle is there's increasing evidence now that perhaps the next stage of technology will be both beyond Einstein as
Mhm.
well as enter into maybe psychic things, because there's increasing evidence that some of these observations and experiences with aliens and such might be a function of our reception and or psychic ability. For example, grays almost always communicate with their abductees telepathically.
Mhm.
So that might be, so maybe we need to evolve a brain that has an even more pronounced prefrontal cortex that expands our psychic abilities, and maybe that's where we move beyond Einstein, because right now Einstein's relativity is like a barrier to going beyond. So for example, faster than light travel. I just discussed some of that stuff. So you can watch it afterwards,
So
and
where
then
do
you can
you
ask me questions next time.
where do you think the AI will fit into that? Do you think AI kind of will mesh with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That AI will take over what we do now as humans. You know, that be able to be like a competent person who can run things like a manager, right? While
Mm.
we develop more psychic abilities and more moral abilities, right? So my suggestion is that because our moral reasoning happens up here, it's the newest part of our brain. Conservatives, because of their fear, are in the reptilian part of our brains, our oldest part of our brains, where
Mhm.
they're in fight or flight, which is why they're so crass, stupid, and violent. So uh, my suggestion is maybe our next stage of evolution will be to develop much more moral reasoning, or you know, psychic, spiritual, ethical reasoning and abilities, and that's when we can have AI do mundane things, have robots do mundane tasks, and the rest of us engage in things like um, art, creativity, technology, things like that. So, and that's hopefully maybe how we can become an interstellar species. That's where I'm putting it now,
Mhm.
and that's why I get so tired with terrestrial politics, because we're following the wrong lead of people who are um, are awful people, are despicable.
It's just so wild to me that Americans have been so brainwashed.
Speaking of that, I wanted to play this video real quick that where you're talking about the underdeveloped. I want to play this real quick before we go out. Um, let's see here. Okay.
It's just so wild to me that Americans have been so brainwashed to feeling like any sort of.
Okay, like I say this all the time. Like what this guy is talking about, like I literally talk about this exact same thing, and I have to read. I'm gonna read an excerpt from an article that I'm not gonna tell you the name of because it's stupid, but it perfectly describes America and our attitudes here. Okay. Americans are, of course, the most thoroughly and passively indoctrinated people on earth. They know next to nothing as a rule about their own history or the histories of other nations or the histories of the various social movements that have risen and fallen in the past, and they certainly know little or nothing of the complexities and contradictions comprised within words like socialism and capitalism. Chiefly, what they have been trained not to know or even suspect is that in many ways they enjoy far fewer freedoms and suffer under a more intrusive centralized state than do the citizens of countries with more vigorous social democratic institutions. This is at once the most comic and the most tragic aspect of the excitable alarm that the talk of social democracy or democratic socialism can elicit on these shores. An enormous number of Americans have been persuaded to believe that they are freer in the abstract than, say, Germans or Danes, precisely because they possess far fewer freedoms in the concrete. They are far more vulnerable to medical and financial crisis, far more likely to receive inadequate health coverage, far more prone to irreparable insolvency, far more unprotected from predatory creditors, far more subject to income inequality, and so forth, while effectively paying more in taxes when one figures in federal, state, local, and sales taxes, and then compounds those by all the other expenditures that in this country, as almost nowhere else, their taxes do not cover. One might think that a people who once rebelled against the mightiest empire on earth on the principle of no taxation without representation would not meekly accept taxation without adequate government services, but we accept what we have become used to, I suppose. Even so, one has to ask, what state apparatus in the free world could be more powerful and tyrannical than one that taxes its citizens while providing no substantial civic benefits in return, solely in order to enrich a pyrocratically overinflated military-industrial complex and to ease the tax burdens of the immensely wealthy?
Thoughts?
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. So I agree.
Okay.
That's why so many people are behind the curve.
Oh yeah, behind the curve, way behind the curve. And I don't even consider myself like Mensa smart. You know, although I do need to, I want to take that test just because I'm curious. But you know, yeah, they're way behind the curve. So until our next show, thank you, Charles. Thank you, listeners, and
Bye.
we will see you on the next one.